I mean, we all know about it.
I feel like I should be informed more than I am, especially in school.
We don't address it on a regular basis.
It should be brought up more because I don't think a lot of people know about it.
It's an issue that needs to have attention brought to it.
I mean, I just think it's something that gets kind of hush-hushed because you don't want people like knowing that kind of like bad stuff about you.
It's something that only comes up when someone who's of a high social status is sexually assaulted or raped.
My definition of sexual assault, probably any forced sexual act upon someone.
Anytime you use force to gain sex or dominance over another person.
Beating a woman to like make her come back and like sleep with you, or like, you know, physically coercing her to do any kind of sexual activity with you.
Well, if either party cannot consent, according at least to California state law, that is a sexual assault.
The majority of women who are assaulted by someone that they know. The stranger rape is a myth. Does it happen? Yes. It's exceedingly rare.
We're all too used to hearing that our friend was assaulted at a party she went to, and we're all too used to hearing that it wasn't reported to the police.
I think it's actually terrifying, especially being a student.
It makes me feel unsafe for women.
It makes me feel mad, it makes me feel sad. It's not fair that this has to happen to women.
If this is your second semester of classes, every single one of you in this class knows someone who has been victimized by violence. Every single one of you.
Too often we engage in victim blaming and accuse women of, oh, well, what were you doing out late at night, and why were you wearing that skirt?
We're getting reports of an average of 1 in 4 women on the campus and in the surrounding community are being raped or sexually assaulted.
Do you see the skirt she's wearing? She's begging for it. Clearly she wanted to get laid. Maybe she did want to get laid, but not with you.
You still own your body. And when we ask questions like, why did she stay? Why did she dress that way? Why did she drink too much? We're somehow saying she therefore lost the ownership of her own body. People always say, let a man you know walk you home. You are actually more safe walking home alone.
Most of the time, it's not the average person that jumps out of the bushes with a ski mask on his face that's doing these assaults or these sexual assaults.
That man who you know is more likely to sexually assault you than you'll come across any stranger who's going to do it.
I know that there are a lot of statistics saying that women are like 1 in 5 are battered all the time, and that's totally not cool.
I know that it happens a lot in the Greek community, and a lot of women are afraid to speak up about it, and that's really unfortunate.
No, I have never really given thought to if sexual assault is a problem on campus or not, so I really can't answer that, but from what I've seen, no, it's not a problem at all.
People trivialize violence against women and minimize it, and a lot of particularly students that I work with on campus don't identify this as something that's very prevalent or that it happens very often.
Men and women both see, sex crimes as something that's private or something that's personal. It's also something that's really touchy and difficult to talk about. So a lot of men and women both avoid discussion, they avoid protests, they avoid any activism.
When a sexual assault happens to a person, it's the most invasive, horrible thing that could happen to a human being. And generally what happens when someone is sexually assaulted is they don't want to tell anyone, and in fact they don't even want to admit it to themselves.
The day of the incident, I was sober. I was actually breaking up with the man that I was seeing when the incident happened.
I was raped by my ex-boyfriend.
I had just met them that night, but I had been talking to them all night long, and they were friends of my neighbors.
After it happened, he had left, and My roommate was getting in her car to go to the gym, and I had that split second where I had to decide if I was going to tell or not.
The next day when I came back to collect my things and go and spend the night at a friend's house, my neighbors were outside smoking cigarettes and hanging out, and I was about to just walk past them and I didn't even want to talk to them, and one of them stopped me.
And I thought about my friends finding out and my family finding out and the humiliation. But then I thought about what had happened to me, and then I knew that I couldn't let that happen to anyone else.
And he said, "Hey, are you okay? You seem kind of down." And I was like, "No, I'm not okay." And I'd rather not talk about it. That friend of yours that came over last night, don't ever bring him over here again. And if you do, I will call the cops.
I was in denial for a really long time. Kind of bottled it up, acted like nothing happened, kept living my life as if everything was okay. And then slowly but surely I started to kind of fall apart, and I realized I have to address this.
After everyone found out, I was ostracized, and I think that's because what happened to me could happen to anyone, and I don't think that they wanted to believe that.
Because society does not want to believe this happens, and they don't want to believe how frequently it happens. And it becomes rather convenient to say, women brought this upon themselves, and in fact they don't.
The most important part with folks who have been survivors of violence or victims of violence or someone who has been victimized is that they get to self-identify.
When people think of abuse, I want them to think about what it really means and the damage that it does, because it doesn't always have to be physical. It doesn't always have to be verbal. It can also be mental.
Like diamonds, rape is forever. Speaking as a victim of rape or a survivor of rape, I can tell you that it never goes away. You know, what is done to the psyche and to the body and to the spirit is forever.
We're beating down the brains of women, the thoughts of women, the emotions of women, and forcing them to appeal to someone who they don't even care about.
Because the reality is, with a lot of our young women, they did come up in a time, in an era, in a generation which encourages them to be incredibly sexually provocative, and that is an exercise of empowerment and liberation for them. What isn't always encouraged in them is practicing really healthy boundaries.
And if you don't push back as a female with those boundaries, then they'll take it to the next level. And in a dorm room situation, it might be separating you from your roommate and then taking advantage of you in your room with the door closed.
So we kind of provide them with all of the costumery and ways to embellish themselves to look prepared for mature interactions and that I'm liberated and I'm empowered. But then what we find more often is that when folks find themselves in these situations, they silence themselves.
And after the incident has occurred, they might make you feel bad that it was your fault.
In a most recent case, I mean, the woman thinks it's their fault. And again, I don't understand how, again, that can ever be the case because they drank too much, because the skirt that they wore, it's never their fault.
It shouldn't be surprising that there's self-doubt, that there's self-blame, that women don't want to come forward, that violence against women is extremely undercounted by everyone says so, including the FBI, because we create a situation in our society where we're not treating them the way we do treat victims of every other crime.
We grow up believing that men are supposed to be this way and women are supposed to be that way.
Because with our boys, we encourage them to be confident, assertive, aggressive, don't take no for an answer, get back in there, don't show emotion, don't ask questions because that shows weakness.
Part of being a man to hook up with a lot of girls.
And there is kind of a, societal, social pressure to kind of be that bigger, like, stereotypical frat guy.
And not just in young males, young women as well, because now they may think that that is okay or that is acceptable. they need to fall into that role of just accepting, their quote unquote place.
And so from a very young age, we discourage our daughters from practicing healthy boundaries, to always allowing their bodies to be accessible, to always communicate with physical affection. A lot of the images that they get from pop culture or media invite them to show up in a way for each other that is very sexually provocative and aggressive.
It's not like this is an anti-sex campaign if you are against violence against women. It's about having consensual sex.
If you look at images of violence or violent images of women in the mainstream media, mainstream culture, and you look at the incidence of violence against women going up, there's a direct correlation. It's not biology. It's not inevitable. It's not what men do.
I never used to notice it before, but I think that you can't go a day without watching TV and hearing a joke or watching a scene objectifying a woman.
It's disheartening the more you hear about women coming forth and talking about how they were abused in this relationship, or, they were mistreated by this person and they didn't even know this person, but just because they were a woman, they had to endure these circumstances.
Men have role models, and these role models are not good men to look up to, and they just view women as other and view them as inferior and things that they can just go have sex with, and it's not a big deal. It's just a woman, her feelings don't matter. It doesn't matter if I have sex with her and just leave her.
I just can't figure out where the line gets drawn between something, that we love like women and then sexual like violence. I just don't understand that.
In terms of how women are conceptualized or related to by men in this culture, I'm going to take a very unpopular stance here. I think that it is largely a function of the media, and more importantly, a function of pornography. If you look at the images of women in pornography, especially over time, pornography has become meaner and meaner and meaner and more violent.
Remember one time we pulled over about 12:30 and one of the officers put his riot gear on. I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "Well, it's about that time in the night when the testosterone levels get to a certain point and guys realize they're not getting laid and they start to fight."
I was at this party, and next thing I knew, about 6 different fights started happening at once.
Sometimes I think they start over girls, actually, guys trying to like show off, or if some guy's hitting on some other guy's girl and he doesn't like it.
It's not like it was in the 50s where, in the 50s they still had sexual assault and everything, but it seems more played out now. Like, a first date never really starts off with violence. It's always usually after the woman thinks that the man really loves her and that he cares about her and she cares about him.
Again, I think it used to be the guy in the trench coat.
Everyone believes, in terms of sexual assault anyway, everyone believes it's strangers. They're strangers jumping out of the dark. And it's simply not true.
Because most sexual assaults, the perpetrators are people that the survivors knew.
If you think about it, if you have your mother, your sister, your aunt, and your girlfriend, which one of those 4 people do you want to be sexually assaulted? That's the kind of environment we're living in now.
That means also that unless there's a couple very, very busy men out there, there's also a wider spread of perpetrators than we really want to believe. So it's our father, our brother, our uncle, our cousins, potentially our significant other.
It's true that survivors and society don't want to accept the fact that sexual assault occurs. In fact, it rocks what we might call the just world hypothesis, that good things happen to good people, and therefore only bad things happen to bad people.
Look, at some point you might have a wife or a daughter, and I really use that, I've got a wife and I've got a daughter. My daughter's going to school in a couple years. I'm pretty realistic about life. I'm concerned because you sometimes, bad things happen to good people.
A lot of men might not even think about what they're doing and how it will affect them in the future. And one of the major ways I think is when you have a child.
I don't think I would want to tell a mother this, but in my heart, I would say what she really needs to know is when she can't do anything, which is almost most of the time, that they'll still love her, that they'll support her, and that they will figure out any ways in which she can get help.
If we can slow down and stop and check in with people. Are you comfortable? Are you sure you want to do this?
After I was raped, it was different because I think it was too real for everyone.
I had one cousin who was really mad at me that I got myself in that situation. That was what she pretty much said. How did this happen to you? Why weren't you paying attention?
But I did encounter a lot of questioning, a lot of doubting, and some hostility.
Victim blaming is very powerful. It's very, very powerful, and it silences folks for asking for assistance, for seeking healing.
It almost seems as though the victim is the one who has done something wrong.
And oftentimes survivors begin to look at themselves and say, well, how did I not see this coming? Like, what did I not really see? And that's where they begin to question their own behaviors, and that's where the self-blame begins.
When we act like, oh, we can teach our 8 and 9-year-olds how to get out of it, and we, how to somehow save themselves and not make themselves that girl that got hurt, we send messages that are telling them they can avoid it. And in actuality, it's not the victim's fault, it's the perpetrator's.
But the reality is they couldn't control the fact that it happened because someone put them in a situation, helped them to get intoxicated, moved them away from other people, got them into a situation where there's nobody else around so that there would be no one to help them. And then once you're in that situation, it's very hard to get out and it's very ambiguous.
So for a long time, it was just difficult to be around people that I love.
The first year was definitely the toughest for me. It felt awkward.
I kind of fell away from my friendships and didn't really talk to anybody for a while because it was just too hard to be where I was at. And so it took time for me to feel relaxed and comfortable and not freak out if someone happened to notice that I'm pretty. It was kind of difficult for a while because I didn't want to be touched by anybody. And then eventually I was able to embrace my relationships again, as well as allow people to hug me again and hold my hand.
I guess through this whole process, what I've really come to appreciate is that it's connected me with a lot of women, and it's connected me to our society in a whole different level. I see the world so differently now.
I think the part that sticks out to me the most is I had to testify for 6.5 hours. And what made it worth it was watching him cower while I testified, and he couldn't even look me in my eyes. And that was very empowering.
It's all about getting the power back that's been taken away from them and to know that it's not their fault. And it takes survivors weeks to really, really understand that it wasn't their fault.
So we talk to women about don't dress certain ways, don't accept drinks from people you don't know, don't walk alone at night, always have your phone on you, yell fire, not rape, take a self-defense class, keep your keys in your hand, carry pepper spray or a rape whistle on you. And so if you build up that list for women, we walk out the door with a very heavy load every day.
I feel that the best thing for me to do is just to stay in a well-lit area, and I definitely do take precautions.
Well, I think it's sad that we leave it to women to protect themselves, because we do workshops all the time and we talk to hundreds and hundreds of women. And as you talk to women, all those women already know a lot about safety.
Being a victim, you become stigmatized as perceived as maybe you did something wrong. They're gonna look at maybe you were too intoxicated. Why were you walking in a dark area that was unlit? without being aware of your surroundings. There is so much victim blaming happening that a lot of people are almost too scared to say what's happened to them.
But as long as we continue to think about sexual assault that way, we will not, and violence against women in general, we will not be able to solve it.
I think alcohol has a lot to do with it, especially in college. Everyone's drinking, and I think alcohol and drugs play a huge role in assaults and violence in general.
I'm cautious when we talk about the role of alcohol and drugs because we can't ignore them. They're absolutely there. But I don't want them to contribute to a victim blaming culture that we have. And I don't want them to be seen as excuses for perpetrators and their behavior.
I think it's to do with the alcohol. Alcohol lowers your ambitions, it lowers everything else, and it lowers the way you think.
You hear about it every so often at like random house parties, people getting roofied.
If you get on the internet and type in date rape drugs, and that's just a nomer for chemicals used to knock people out, you'll get lists of how to make it with household chemicals, household stuff. Not only that, prescription medications used improperly can easily knock someone out long enough for them to be assaulted, raped, battered, and never have a memory of it occurring.
All we do is smoke weed every day, all day, every day. Fucking get drinks, go to the bars, do whatever the fuck we want because we're in college. We fucking get fucked up. So fuck you if you're gonna hate on it, bitch.
We get fucked up.
You got the shit, Bill.
We fuck fat bitches.
Yeah, fuck you, bitch.
Real fat lines. That's what we do.
I'm sorry for yelling that shit so loud, but...
So our focus is on the substance instead of the underlying issue of violence, of a need to have control over someone, to dominate someone, to exercise power over someone. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that alcohol and substance abuse cause violence, and they don't.
I mean, it's not safe for anyone to walk around at nighttime alone.
So if you were to walk around the town, maybe at night, or you're at a party, women might get groped or, you know, touched.
For women, we're used to being in a culture where we don't go out at night by ourselves, and we're used to not being able to walk home.
And it should be your right to walk at night and feel safe.
You can be walking down the street naked. And if you walk down the street naked, it doesn't mean you're telling anyone they can do anything to your body.
I think violence against women, unfortunately, in our culture is insidious. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. It's incredibly prevalent, much more than folks realize, particularly on college campuses.
Each year, on average, 1,181 women are murdered by an intimate partner, which means that on an average, 3 women a day are killed by somebody they should be able to trust.
So if I could make any changes in the world, it would be to shift the paradigm that violence against women is normal, it's acceptable, it's a rite of passage, or it's just something that happens, or she was kind of asking for it anyways. It's not normal. It's not okay, and it's violent for a reason. It's called violence for a reason.
In the end of the day, only men can solve this problem. You know, women aren't hurting themselves. Men are hurting women, right? And so men have to work with other men to tell them it's not okay.
I think that we need to educate the male community about how unsafe it is for women.
The new trends in sexual assault prevention really need to be looking at men and men educating men.
This is not just about women. This is just as prevalent for men. And if we can get them to have a voice as well, then I think we can really make an impact.
But we also need a massive shift in cultural consciousness around this issue. A massive shift in that, in the way that we view women, in the way that we view men.
Things that women are told in terms of how they are supposed to prevent the violence against them controls our behavior. And it's also not our job to keep other people from assaulting us. It's their job not to assault us. And that's what we need to start really focusing on.
Honestly, I really think that it would be fabulous to see males take a stand against other people who are committing these crimes, and to see the males come together with the females who are fighting this already and to take a stand.
I believe
most of us would prefer to have our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our female friends feel safe.
If your issue is you can't control yourself and you have to, treat women as if they're less than a person or less than a man, then you should get help for that.
Sexually assaulting or raping women is not okay, and it's not the woman's fault. We should start teaching men, don't rape women.
If we start seriously asking questions about masculinity and about humanity, and if we begin to struggle to find these answers, we will find ways to build a world rooted in real justice and real equality, a world in which women do not need to take back the night. But until we do, let's march.